The rosary shattered against the marble floor of the luxurious café, each bead ricocheting like wooden tears, carrying decades of prayers and memories. The ensuing silence was deafening. Father Thomas Matthews, a 72-year-old priest, watched his sacred beads roll beneath the polished shoes of the patrons, while Officer Ryan's voice still echoed in the air. "You don't belong here, old man." On that golden autumn afternoon, the contrast couldn't have been starker. Thomas's worn cassock, a silent witness to countless confessions and consolations, stood out like a shadow amidst the brightness and luxury of the city's most prestigious establishment. His presence caused visible discomfort on the faces of the elite savoring their gourmet coffees in the finest porcelain cups. Father Thomas was waiting for his nephew David, a renowned prosecutor, when Officers Ryan and Marcus decided his humble figure tarnished the reputation of the place. What they didn't know, as they approached with heavy steps and sneering smiles, was that this seemingly frail man had dedicated his life to rescuing lost souls from the shadows of despair. Thomas's wrinkled hands, which had delicately held the rosary moments ago, now rested calmly on the white linen tablecloth. His face, marked by age and wisdom, showed no fear in the face of growing hostility. In his eyes shone a disconcerting serenity, as if he saw beyond appearances, beyond the impeccable uniforms and intimidating postures. "Show your documents now," Marcus ordered, his voice cutting through the air conditioning like a razor. The other patrons pretended not to see the scene, hiding behind their expensive menus and forced conversations, but their ears were attuned to every word exchanged. What no one could predict was that this moment of public humiliation was about to transform into a profound lesson on hasty judgments and the true meaning of dignity. Thomas Matthews carried with him not just prayers, but also secrets and stories that connected lives in unexpected ways, including one of the men now treating him with such contempt. The tension in the air was palpable, growing with each passing second like a storm about to break. Soon, everyone present would witness how a simple act of prejudice could trigger a series of revelations that would forever alter the course of their lives, proving that sometimes the greatest lessons in humanity come from the most unlikely places. The rosary beads still spun on the floor when Ryan grabbed Father Thomas's arm with unnecessary force. The rough touch against the threadbare sleeve of the cassock contrasted with the delicate hands of the elderly man, calloused from years dedicated to caring for others. "Documents. Now," Marcus repeated, his voice laden with a disdain that made the other patrons shrink in their seats. The luxurious café, with its dark wood paneling and crystal chandeliers, transformed into a stage for a cruel display of prejudice. Thomas lowered his eyes to the scattered beads, each one a reminder of the lives he had touched over the years. The most worn bead, with its deep grooves, brought back the memory of a night when a frightened boy knocked on the parish door, fleeing the cold and hunger. That same boy would later choose a path that led him to wear a uniform much like the one now intimidating him. "My documents are here," Thomas replied with a calmness that seemed to stem from an infinite well of inner peace. His hands moved slowly toward the pocket of his cassock, every movement observed with suspicion by the officers. A woman at the next table covered her mouth with her hand, horrified by the scene unfolding. Her husband adjusted the knot of his expensive tie, averting his gaze as if injustice could be made invisible by ignoring it. "Faster, old man," Ryan urged, tightening his grip on the priest's arm. "We don't have all day to deal with people who shouldn't be here." The soft sound of one of the rosary beads rolling to a stop at Marcus' feet seemed to carry a weight greater than its small form suggested. Thomas watched the young officer for a moment, recognizing in his green eyes the same color as those of the scared boy from years ago. "You know, son," Thomas began, his gentle voice cutting through the tension like a ray of sunlight through heavy clouds, "a long time ago, I met a boy who also liked to show strength when he was afraid." The words hit Marcus like an invisible punch. Something in his stance shifted, a barely perceptible tremor in his hands as he held the baton. Ryan noticed the change in his partner but interpreted it as hesitation. "Don't try your manipulations here, priest," Ryan growled, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. The air in the café grew denser, laden with secrets on the verge of being revealed. Thomas finally reached for his documents, moving with the same unwavering serenity. His hands did not tremble as he handed over the small identification card. The moment Marcus took it, his fingers briefly brushed the priest's, and an old memory flashed in his eyes. A bowl of hot soup on a cold night, words of comfort whispered in the dark of a small chapel. The silence that followed was different from before. It was no longer filled only with tension but with an impending revelation that threatened to dismantle the carefully built walls between past and present. Somewhere in the city, David, Thomas's nephew, was speeding toward the cafe, unaware that he was about to witness a lesson in the true meaning of justice and compassion. Marcus held Father Thomas's identification card with visibly trembling hands. Long-buried memories began to surface. The smell of hot soup on cold nights, the gentle touch of a hand on his shoulder, words of hope whispered when the world seemed to be falling apart. "You?" His voice faltered, his eyes fixed on the serene face of the priest. "Your Father Thomas from St. Michael's Parish?" Ryan looked at his partner in surprise, noticing the change in his posture. The luxurious cafe seemed to hang in suspense, as if time slowed for this moment of recognition. "Yes, son," Thomas responded softly, his gentle gaze meeting Marcus' troubled eyes. 15 years have passed, but I never forgot the young man who appeared at my door on a winter night, looking for more than just shelter." The words touched something deep within Marcus. His hands released the baton, which fell with a dull thud on the marble floor. Ryan, confused by his partner's transformation, stepped forward, still holding the priest's arm. "Marcus, what's happening?" Ryan demanded, his voice betraying uncertainty. "This man?" Marcus began, his voice thick with emotion. "This man saved me when no one else wanted to help. I was 16 on the streets involved with drugs." He paused, the words heavy with the weight of memories. Thomas smiled gently, reaching out to touch Marcus's shoulder. "You were just a frightened boy looking for your way. Like so many others who found refuge in our parish." The cafe patrons who had previously pretended not to see the scene of discrimination, now watched openly, silent witnesses to a story of redemption unfolding before their eyes. A woman discreetly wiped away a tear. "He gave me more than just a place to sleep," Marcus continued, turning to Ryan. "He gave me education, direction, a chance to change my life." His hands trembled as he bent down to collect the scattered rosary beads. Ryan, realizing the magnitude of his mistake, released the priest's arm. Shame began to color his face, replacing the earlier arrogance. "Each bead of this rosary represents a touched life," Thomas explained softly, watching Marcus gather the pieces with reverent care. "Some stories are of pain, others of hope. All are part of a larger journey of transformation." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of the cafe door opening. David, Thomas's nephew, entered the establishment, his police commander uniform immaculate. His eyes scanned the unusual scene. His uncle, the two officers, the scattered rosary beads. The moment of truth had arrived. A confluence of past and present that was about to teach profound lessons about justice, compassion, and the transformative power of unconditional love. David paused at the cafe entrance, his heart tightening at the sight of his uncle Thomas sitting there, surrounded by officers, with the beads of his precious rosary scattered on the floor. Years of police commander training had not prepared him for this moment, seeing the man who raised him being treated with such disrespect. "What is going on here?" His voice emerged firm but laden with restrained emotion. The cafe patrons turned their gazes toward him, recognizing the authority in his uniform. Ryan straightened up instantly, but Marcus remained crouched, still gathering the rosary beads with an almost reverential care. The silence in the cafe now had a different weight, filled with truths about to be revealed. "David, my son," Thomas spoke with that same gentle voice that had guided so many lost souls. "Don't worry. Sometimes we need moments like this to remember who we really are." His uncle's words hit David like a breath of fresh air, bringing memories of his own journey. He recalled the nights when Thomas stayed up, helping him with homework, encouraging him to pursue his dreams of bringing justice to the world. Now, seeing his uncle there, he realized how far he had strayed from those core values. "Commander," Marcus finally stood, holding the reconstructed rosary in his trembling hands. "This man, your uncle, he changed my life 15 years ago. I was a teenager on the streets without hope, until he took me in at the parish." David looked at Marcus with new eyes, recognizing in him a reflection of so many other lives his uncle had touched over the years. The luxurious cafe, with all its pretension and superficiality, seemed to diminish in the face of this moment of recognition. "Uncle Thomas always saw beyond appearances," David said, his voice softening. "He taught me that true justice begins with compassion." He approached the table, placing a gentle hand on his uncle's shoulder. "But somewhere along the way I forgot that lesson." Thomas smiled, that smile with the power to illuminate the darkest corners of the soul. "It's never too late to remember, David. The heart has a memory of its own." Ryan, still standing nearby, watched the scene with a mixture of shame and admiration. His face revealed the internal conflict of someone beginning to question his own actions and prejudices. A woman at a nearby table couldn't hold back her tears, moved by the transformation she witnessed. Her husband, who had earlier hidden behind the newspaper, now watched openly, his expression revealing a newfound understanding. The cafe, which moments before had been a stage for discrimination, was transforming into a sacred space of reconciliation and renewal. The walls that once separated different worlds, the luxurious and the humble, the powerful and the servile, began to crumble, revealing the fundamental truth Thomas had always known. In the end, we are all part of the same human family. Ryan stood motionless, watching the scene before him unfold like a dream. The luxurious cafe, which moments ago had been the stage for his arrogance, now bore witness to his own inner transformation. His hands, once clenched with authority, now trembled slightly at his sides. His voice faltered, laden with shame. "Father Thomas, I'm sorry." The words came out as a whisper but carried the weight of a profound truth. Thomas turned his gentle gaze toward Ryan, those eyes that had seen so many lost souls find their way back. "Son, sometimes we need to lose ourselves to truly find our way." Marcus stepped closer to his partner, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Ryan, you don't know half the stories this man carries. When I was just a lost boy, he not only gave me shelter, he gave me dignity, showed me that I could be more than my circumstances." David watched the transformation happening before his eyes. As a commander, he had witnessed countless moments of conflict, but rarely had he seen such a deep and genuine change in someone's heart. "Every day," Thomas began, his soft voice filling the cafe's silence, "people pass through our lives wearing masks. Masks of power, status, certainty. But behind each one is a heart seeking connection, seeking meaning." A young waitress timidly approached the table, carrying a tray with steaming cups of coffee. "Please," she said, "accept this. It's on the house." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Ryan sat down slowly, as if the weight of his previous actions had finally caught up with him. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice low. "How can you offer forgiveness so easily after the way I treated you?" Thomas smiled, picking up one of the coffee cups. "Forgiveness isn't something we offer because someone deserves it, but because we choose to release our own hearts from the weight of resentment. Every person I meet is an opportunity to practice this unconditional love." The other cafe patrons, who had previously kept their distance out of prejudice, now approached discreetly, drawn by the authenticity of the moment. An elderly woman passed her silk handkerchief to the waitress, who quietly wiped her tears. "Uncle," David spoke, his voice thick with emotion, "you continue to be my greatest teacher. Even after all these years, you still teach me the true meaning of justice and compassion." The aroma of coffee mingled with something more in the air. Perhaps it was the fragrance of transformation, the unique scent of hearts opening to new possibilities. The luxurious establishment had become an improvised sanctuary, where masks fell and deep truths surfaced. The cafe had transformed into a sanctuary of long-held truths. The afternoon light streamed through the high windows, touching every face with a golden glow, as if nature itself wished to illuminate this moment of transformation. Marcus held the restored rosary in his hands, each bead now a silent testimony to his own journey. "Father Thomas," he began, his voice soft with memories, "I remember that first night at the parish. You didn't ask any questions, you just offered me a bowl of hot soup and a safe place to sleep." David approached his uncle, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Years of dedication to his career had created a distance between them, but now, in this moment of truth, the barriers crumbled like autumn leaves. "Uncle," he said, sitting beside Thomas, "why did you never tell me about Marcus? About all the other young people you helped?" Thomas smiled, that gentle smile that had the power to calm inner storms. "Each life touched is a sacred gift, David. We don't need to announce our good deeds for them to have value." Ryan, who moments earlier had represented the face of inflexible authority, now showed a vulnerability rarely seen in an officer. "I always thought that delivering justice meant being tough, unyielding," he confessed, his voice low but clear. "Today I learned that true strength comes from kindness." An elderly lady from a nearby table stood up, approaching with hesitant steps. "Father," she said, "you remind me of my father. He also believed that everyone deserved a second chance." Her words carried the weight of her own memories, stories of forgiveness and new beginnings. The cafe, once a symbol of status and exclusion, had transformed into a space of collective healing. The waitress returned with more coffee, her eyes shining with a newfound understanding of the power of small acts of kindness. "You know, David," Thomas spoke, gently touching his nephew's arm, "your mother would be proud of the man you've become. She always said that true justice comes from the heart." The mention of his mother struck a sensitive chord in David. Memories of his childhood flowed. Nights when his uncle would tell stories, Sunday mornings at the parish, simple moments that had shaped his character. "It's time to return to the roots," David said, his voice firm with determination. "To remember why I chose this path. Not to wield power, but to protect and serve as you always taught me." The afternoon sun painted long shadows on the marble floor, but inside the cafe, a different light shone. The light of understanding, forgiveness, and human connection in its purest form. Marcus leaned forward, his hands still caressing the rosary beads. "I remember all the nights you stayed up with me, Father Thomas, when the nightmares wouldn't let me sleep. You never asked about my past, you just held my hand and said that tomorrow would be different." His voice trembled with the memory, touching something deep in the hearts of everyone present. A gentle silence hung in the air as Ryan removed his badge and placed it on the table. "I chose this profession to make a difference," he confessed, his voice laden with a new understanding. "But today I realized I had forgotten the true meaning of serve and protect. Father Thomas taught me more in an hour than I learned in years at the academy." Across the cafe, the elderly couple who had previously shown disdain now approached timidly. The man, still adjusting his expensive tie as a shield, stopped by the table. "My wife and we'd like to make a donation to your parish, Father. To help other young people like Marcus." His words carried the weight of regret and the promise of change. The cafe filled with the last golden rays of the setting sun, bathing everyone present in an almost sacred light. Father Thomas held the restored rosary in his hands, each bead now carrying not only old memories but also the stories of this extraordinary day. "Sometimes," Thomas spoke softly, "God places us in unexpected situations to remind us of who we truly are." His gentle gaze passed over each face around him. David, his nephew who had found his purpose again. Marcus, the lost boy who had become a man of worth. Ryan, who discovered that true authority is born of compassion. David approached his uncle, holding his wrinkled hands in his own. "You always said there are no coincidences, only destined encounters. Today I understand what that means." His words carried the weight of years of distance and the promise of a new beginning. The waitress returned one last time, now with a tray of small homemade cakes. "My grandmother always said that special moments deserve something sweet," she shared, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. The simple gesture touched something deep in everyone present. Marcus removed his badge and placed it next to Ryan's on the table. "We started this day thinking we knew everything about authority and respect," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "We ended up learning that true strength comes from humility." The elderly couple, who had promised the donation, remained close, as if unwilling to break the magic of this moment. The lady held her husband's arm, her expensive jewelry shining less than the tears in her eyes. "Sometimes we need to be reminded of our own humanity," she whispered.